Pay attention to the young man walking through the east entrance of Douglas Academy High School. September 12th, 1997, 2:47 p.m. He's wearing a navy blue hoodie, khaki cargo pants, white Nike Air Force 1 second that he saved 4 months of McDonald's paychecks to buy. The backpack slung over his right shoulder has a small tear near the bottom zipper. His name is Terrell Hayes. He is 16 years old, a junior, honor roll student with a 3.8 gigapascals. He's heading to Mr. Washington's chemistry lab for extra credit tutoring. He has a calculus test tomorrow that he's worried about. He wants to get into Howard University, wants to study engineering. Build bridges, he told his grandmother. Make things that last. Now pay attention to the silver sedan pulling into the staff parking lot. Row B. Space 7. The driver doesn't work here. He's been here 3 times this week. Security never questioned him. Never asked for ID. Within 90 minutes, Terrell Hayes will be gone. Within 3 hours, his grandmother will call the police. Within 6 weeks, his case will be marked cold. Within 26 years, his face will appear on a school security tape that everyone assumed had been erased. This is not a story about a teenager who ran away. This is not a story about a troubled kid who couldn't handle pressure. This is a story about a boy who walked into his school and never walked out. About a grandmother who refused to believe the lies they told her. About surveillance footage that sat in a basement storage room for over 2 decades before anyone thought to look at it again. Welcome to Missing Uncovered. If this story hits home, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, let's begin. Detective Raymond Cooper stood in the basement of Douglas Academy High School, staring at rows of cardboard boxes stacked floor to ceiling. The school was scheduled for demolition in 4 months. Everything had to be cataloged, archived, or destroyed. That's when a facilities manager named Kenneth Marshall called the Atlanta Police Department's cold case unit with a question nobody expected. What do we do with old security tapes from the 90s? Most departments would have said throw them out. Technology had moved on. VHS was obsolete. But Cooper had been working cold cases for 11 years. He knew better than to assume anything was worthless. Marshall led him to a metal shelf in the far corner. 12 plastic bins, each labeled with a year, 1995, 1996, 1997, 1998. Cooper pulled the 1997 bin. Inside were 23 VHS tapes, each marked with a date range. September 1 to 15, September 16 to 30, October 1 to 15. He asked Marshall if the school still had a working VCR. Marshall laughed. Said they had one in the AV room that hadn't been used since 2003. Might still work. Might not. 3 hours later, Cooper sat alone in that room, feeding tape after tape into the ancient machine. Static. Snow. Tracking issues. Then, finally, September 8 to 14, 1997 played. The footage was grainy. Black and white. Timestamp in the corner. The camera covered the east entrance and part of the main hallway. Students moving in clusters. Teachers carrying coffee. Normal school day activity. Cooper fast-forwarded, watched at double speed. Then he saw it. 2:47 p.m. September 12th, 1997. A young man in a navy hoodie and white sneakers entered through the east doors. Walked down the hallway. Turned left toward the science wing. Cooper paused the tape, rewound. Watched again. The teenager's face was visible for exactly 3 seconds as he glanced toward the camera. Cooper pulled out his phone, opened the case file he'd been reviewing all week. Missing person report, filed September 12th, 1997. Terrell Marcus Hayes, age 16. Last seen leaving Douglas Academy High School, approximately 2:45 p.m. Never made it home. No witnesses. No evidence. No leads. The photograph in the file showed a young man with a quiet smile and intelligent eyes. Cooper looked at the frozen image on the television screen. Same build. Same height. Same hoodie his grandmother had described to police. But that wasn't what made Cooper's hands start shaking. At 4:22 p.m. on that same tape, Terrell Hayes appeared again, walking back through the same hallway. But he wasn't alone. A man in his 40s, white, wearing a brown jacket and jeans, had his hand on Terrell's shoulder. They walked together toward the east entrance. The man was talking. Terrell's head was down. His body language was wrong, stiff, compliant, afraid. At 4:23 p.m., they exited the building together. Terrell Hayes never appeared on any tape after that moment. Cooper sat in that room until past midnight, watching every remaining tape from September and October 1997. He documented every time the man in the brown jacket appeared. September 9th, September 10th, September 11th, September 12th. Always the same pattern. Park in staff lot. Walk inside. Leave an hour later. On September 12th, he left with Terrell. Cooper called the cold case unit supervisor. At 6 a.m., the next morning, told her they needed to reopen the Hayes investigation. Told her they had video evidence that nobody had seen in 26 years. Told her this wasn't a runaway case. It never was. Terrell Hayes was 16 years old and terrified of disappointing his grandmother. Vivian Hayes raised him from age 7 after his mother died of an asthma attack and his father went to prison for armed robbery. She worked double shifts as a dialysis technician at Grady Memorial Hospital. Lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side. Kept it spotless. Kept Terrell focused. Made sure he understood that education was the only way out. Terrell was quiet. Thoughtful. The kind of student who sat in the front row and took notes, even when the teacher was just reviewing. He loved math. Loved the certainty of it. Loved that there was always a right answer if you worked hard enough to find it. He had 3 close friends. Darnell, who played saxophone in the school band. Isaiah, who ran track. And Malik, who wanted to be a lawyer. They called themselves the Four, even though nobody else called them anything. On September 12th, Terrell woke up at 6 a.m. Grandmother was already gone. She left him $20 on the kitchen counter and a note that said, "Love you, baby. Eat breakfast." He poured cereal, drank orange juice straight from the carton, put on his navy hoodie and his white Air Force 1 second, grabbed his backpack, caught the 47 bus at 7:15 a.m. School started at 7:50 a.m. First period was AP English. Second period was U.S. History. Third period was chemistry. Fourth period was calculus with Mrs. Patterson. That's where he struggled. Not because he wasn't smart. Because anxiety made him second-guess every answer. He had a test the next day, worth 20% of his grade. He needed to do well. Howard University didn't accept B students. After school, he went to Mr. Washington's chemistry lab. Mr. Washington was one of the good ones, black man in his 50s, who'd worked at Douglas for 20 years. He stayed late twice a week to help students who asked. Terrell asked. They worked on stoichiometry problems. Until 4:15 p.m. Terrell thanked him. Packed his bag. That's when he saw the man in the brown jacket standing near the double doors. The man smiled, called him by name, said he was sent by Mrs. Patterson, said she wanted to meet about the test, said she was waiting in her car in the parking lot, needed to give him study materials, would only take 5 minutes. Terrell hesitated. Mrs. Patterson had never mentioned this. But the man knew his name, knew about the test, seemed legitimate. Terrell was a polite kid, respectful, taught to trust adults, especially adults at school. He followed the man outside. Security footage shows them walking together across the parking lot. At 4:23 p.m. Shows them approaching a silver sedan. Shows the man opening the passenger door. Shows Terrell getting inside. The car pulled out of the lot at 4:24 p.m. Turned south on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. Was never seen again. Vivian Hayes got home from her shift at 6:45 p.m. Terrell should have been there. His calculus textbook was supposed to be open on the kitchen table. Dinner was supposed to be warming in the oven. Instead, the apartment was dark and empty. She called his phone. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Called Darnell. He said he hadn't seen Terrell since lunch. Called Isaiah. He said the same thing. Called Malik. He said Terrell mentioned going to chemistry tutoring, but that was hours ago. By 8 p.m., Vivian was calling the school, got the after-hours answering service, left 3 messages, finally reached the principal's emergency line at 8:30 p.m. Principal said Terrell had been at school all day, no disciplinary issues, no indication of any problem. Vivian called the police at 9:12 p.m. The officer who took the report was polite but dismissive. 16-year-old boys sometimes stayed out late. Maybe he was with friends. Maybe he got distracted. Maybe he'd show up in a few hours embarrassed. Vivian told him Terrell wasn't that kind of kid. Terrell didn't skip class. Didn't break curfew. Didn't lie. The officer wrote down the information, said they'd keep an eye out, said to call back if he didn't show up by morning. Terrell didn't show up by morning. Vivian filed an official missing person report at 7 a.m. on September 13th. Brought his school photo. Described what he'd been wearing. Gave them his phone number. Told them about the calculus test. About Howard University. About how he never went anywhere without calling first. The detective assigned to the case was a white man in his late 50s named Gary Mitchell. He took notes. Asked standard questions. Then asked questions that made Vivian's stomach drop. Did Terrell have a girlfriend? Any conflicts with other students? Any history of drug use? Any gang affiliations? Any reason he might want to leave? Vivian said no. Said none of that was true. Said her grandson was honor roll. Said he was focused and responsible and scared of disappointing her. Detective Mitchell nodded. Wrote something in his notepad. Told her they'd investigate. Told her most teenagers who go missing come home within 48 hours. Told her to try not to worry. Search teams went out that weekend. Volunteers from Vivian's church, Greater Hope Baptist, students from Douglas Academy, teachers, neighbors. They walked the surrounding streets, checked alleys, asked shopkeepers if they'd seen him. Nobody had. Police canvassed the school, interviewed students, interviewed staff. Nobody reported seeing anything unusual. Nobody remembered Terrell talking about leaving. Nobody had any information that helped. By October 1st, Detective Mitchell told Vivian the case was going cold. No witnesses. No physical evidence. No activity on Terrell's phone after 4:20 p.m. on September 12th. No bank card usage. No sightings. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. Mitchell suggested that Terrell might have run away, that the pressure of school and college applications might have been too much, that some kids break under expectations they can't meet. Vivian told him he was wrong, told him Terrell wouldn't do that, wouldn't leave her like that. Something happened to him. Someone took him. Mitchell closed his notepad, told her they'd keep the case open, but his tone said he'd already moved on. For 26 years, Vivian Hayes refused to believe her grandson was gone by choice. She kept his bedroom exactly as he left it. Navy hoodie hanging on the back of his chair. Calculus textbook still open to Chapter 7. Howard University brochure still on his desk with corners bent from repeated reading. Poster of Malcolm X still on the wall. Basketball sneakers still lined up by his closet. She dusted every week, changed his sheets every month, kept the space alive. Every September 12th, she held a vigil. Started at Greater Hope Baptist Church, then walked to Douglas Academy, then stood outside the east entrance where he was last seen. For the first 5 years, people came. Darnell, Isaiah, Malik, teachers. By year 15, it was mostly just Vivian. By year 20, it was always just Vivian. She kept boxes of flyers in her closet. Black and white photocopies with Terrell's face and the word missing in bold letters. Every few months, she'd print new ones. Post them around the neighborhood. Most got torn down within days. Rain destroyed others. Time made them irrelevant. But she kept printing them anyway. She called the Atlanta Police Department every 3 months, asked for updates. Was told there was nothing new. Asked them to reopen the investigation. Was told there was no new evidence. Asked them to at least look again. was transferred to voicemail, left messages that were never returned. People told her to move on, to accept that Terrell was gone, to live her life, to find closure, to let go. She couldn't, wouldn't. A grandmother knows. Terrell wouldn't just disappear. Something happened to him that day. Someone took him from that school. And, until someone showed her proof otherwise, she refused to believe anything else. By 2024, Vivian was 71 years old. Still worked part-time at the hospital. Still lived in the same apartment. Still kept Terrell's room untouched. Still held vigils on September 12th. Still believed. Detective Raymond Cooper called Vivian Hayes at 9 a.m. Told her they needed to meet. Told her it was about Terrell. Told her they'd found something. She sat across from him in the cold case unit office 3 hours later. Hands folded in her lap. Face careful. She'd been through this before. False leads. Mistaken identities. Well-meaning tips that led nowhere. She didn't let herself hope anymore. Cooper set up a laptop. Explained that they'd recovered old security footage from Douglas Academy. Explained that the footage had been in storage for 26 years. Explained that nobody had reviewed it during the original investigation. Then he pressed play. Vivian watched Terrell walk through the east entrance. Watched him glance toward the camera. Watched him turn left toward the science wing. She made a sound. Small. Involuntary. That was her baby. 16 years old again. Alive. Moving. Real. Cooper fast-forwarded. Showed her the 4:22 p.m. timestamp. Showed her Terrell, walking back through the hallway, with the man in the brown jacket. Showed them leaving together. Vivian stopped breathing. Cooper paused the footage, enhanced the image, zoomed in on the man's face, asked if she recognized him. She didn't. Cooper told her they were running facial recognition. Told her they were cross-referencing with staff records from 1997. Told her this changed everything. This proved Terrell didn't run away. This proved someone took him from that school. Vivian didn't cry. She'd cried all her tears years ago. She just sat there looking at the frozen image of her grandson walking toward a door he'd never walk back through. After 26 years of being told she was wrong, of being dismissed and pitied and ignored, she finally had proof. Terrell didn't leave her. Someone took him, and now the whole world would know it. Detective Cooper worked the case for 72 hours straight. He pulled every school record from September 1997. Staff rosters, substitute teacher lists, vendor contracts, visitor logs, maintenance schedules, security protocols, every name of every person who had legitimate access to that building. He ran the man's face through facial recognition databases, state DMV records, criminal databases, sex offender registries, missing persons reports, unidentified remains. Nothing matched. He interviewed former staff members. Principal had retired in 2005. Vice principal had died in 2012. Mr. Washington, the chemistry teacher, was living in Florida. He remembered Terrell. Remembered tutoring him that day. Said Terrell left around 4:15 p.m. Said he seemed fine. Normal. Focused. Mr. Washington never saw the man in the brown jacket. Cooper reviewed the original investigation file. Detective Mitchell had done basic due diligence, but had clearly assumed Terrell ran away. No real follow-up. No deep canvassing. No search warrants. No subpoenas. Just a few interviews and then bureaucratic acceptance that another black teenager had disappeared and probably didn't want to be found. Cooper tracked down Detective Mitchell. He was 81 now, retired in 2003, living in a nursing home with advanced dementia. Couldn't remember the case. Couldn't remember much of anything. The break came on March 12th. A forensic analyst named Keisha Williams found a partial fingerprint on the school's visitor log from September 10th. 1997. The log required all non-staff to sign in. Most people scribbled illegible signatures, but forensics pulled prints from the paper. Most were degraded, but one was clear enough to run. The print matched a man named Leonard Wyatt, white male, born 1956. Last known address in Marietta, Georgia. Wyatt had a record. 2 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor in 1989. Arrested for soliciting a minor in 1992. Charges dropped. Arrested again in 1994. For loitering near a school. Served 90 days. Released with probation. In 1998, Leonard Wyatt disappeared. No death certificate, no new address, no employment records, no credit card activity, no trace. Cooper obtained a warrant for Wyatt's last known property. A small house on 3 acres in rural Cherokee County. The house had been abandoned since 1998. Foreclosed in 2001. Sold to a development company that never developed it. The property sat empty for 23 years. On March 15, 2024, Cooper and a forensics team entered the property. The house was a wreck. Roof partially collapsed. Windows shattered. Walls covered in black mold. But the basement was intact. They found it behind a false wall in the northwest corner. A hidden room. 10 feet by 10 feet. Concrete floor. Steel door with a deadbolt on the outside. No windows. Soundproofed walls. Inside the room were 3 metal folding chairs. A camping toilet. 5 empty water bottles. A stack of blankets. And a cardboard box containing Polaroid photographs. The photographs showed teenage boys, different ages, different years, all of them restrained, all of them terrified, all of them in that same concrete room. The forensics team found biological evidence, hair samples, fingerprints, DNA. They found scratch marks on the walls, found writing carved into the concrete, initials, dates, prayers. One set of initials read T. H. The 12th of September, 2097. They found Terrell's backpack in a crawl space beneath the basement stairs. Still had his calculus textbook inside. Still had his notebook with his neat handwriting. Still had his house keys on a Morehouse College keychain his grandmother had given him for his birthday. They found clothing buried in the backyard. Navy hoodie. Khaki cargo pants. White Nike Air Force 1 second. Size 10. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Terrell Hayes. They didn't find his body, but they found evidence suggesting at least 6 other victims. 6 other boys who'd been held in that room. 6 other families who'd been searching for answers. Cooper called Vivian Hayes on March 18th. Told her they'd found Terrell's belongings. Told her the DNA matched. Told her there was no doubt. Told her Terrell had been held in that house in September 1997. Told her they were still searching. Still trying to determine what happened after that. Vivian asked if her grandson was alive. Cooper couldn't answer. The investigation expanded rapidly. FBI was brought in. Cold cases from surrounding counties were reviewed. Missing persons reports from 1,990 to 1,998 were cross-referenced. Property records were traced. Financial records were subpoenaed. Witnesses were re-interviewed. They identified Leonard Wyatt as the primary suspect. But Wyatt was dead. Georgia Department of Vital Records confirmed he died in a house fire in Knoxville, Tennessee, in March 1998. Body identified through dental records. Cause of death ruled accidental. But the timing was suspicious. 1 month after Terrell disappeared. 1 month after the house in Cherokee County was abandoned. They found evidence linking Wyatt to 5 other missing boys between 1991 and 1997. Jamal Richards, age 15, disappeared October, 1991. DeAndre Washington, age 14, disappeared March, 1994. Kevin Robinson, age 16, disappeared July, 1995. Brandon Lewis, age 17, disappeared January 1997. Disappeared June 1997. All 6 boys were African American. All 6 were students at schools where Wyatt had worked as a substitute janitor or maintenance contractor. All 6 disappeared between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on school days. All 6 were described by families as responsible, focused, not the type to run away. All 6 cases went cold within weeks. None of the original investigations connected the cases. None of the detectives saw the pattern. 6 black boys disappearing over 6 years, and nobody noticed it was the same predator. The forensics team found more evidence in Wyatt's abandoned house. A journal, handwritten entries documenting his methods, how he identified targets, how he gained their trust, how he isolated them, how he controlled them. The journal didn't explicitly confess to murder, but it described transporting boys to a secondary location, described disposing of evidence in remote areas, described covering his tracks. The journal's last entry was dated September 28, 1997. It read, "Police asking questions at school. Time to disappear. Loose ends must be handled." Cooper believed Wyatt killed the boys he was holding, then fled, then staged his own death or died accidentally while fleeing. Either way, the predator was gone. But so were the victims. Without bodies, without witnesses, without definitive proof, the case remained open but unresolved. The Atlanta Police Department held a press conference. Chief of Police Sandra Williams stood at a podium. Behind her were photographs of 6 boys: Terrell Hayes, Jamal Richards, DeAndre Washington, Kevin Robinson, Brandon Lewis, Isaiah Thompson. Chief Williams stated that all 6 cases were now connected. Stated that Leonard Wyatt was the primary suspect. Stated that evidence indicated he'd held these boys in a hidden room in Cherokee County. Stated that he'd likely killed them before fleeing in early 1998. Stated that the department was committed to finding their remains. Stated that the original investigations had failed these families. Stated that they deserved better then, and they deserved better now. Vivian Hayes sat in the front row. So did 5 other mothers. Women who'd spent decades searching. Decades being dismissed. Decades being told their sons probably ran away. Decades knowing in their hearts that something terrible had happened. The press conference was broadcast nationally. The story went viral. Not the way these mothers had hoped for 26 years. But finally, people were paying attention. Finally, people believed them. An advocacy group called Voices for the Missing contacted the families, offered support, offered legal representation, offered to pressure authorities to continue searching. The mothers formed their own group, called themselves the 6, met monthly, shared resources, shared grief, shared determination. Search teams were deployed to 3 potential burial sites identified through analysis of Wyatt's property records and journal entries. A wooded area near Lake Lanier, a construction site that had been developed in 1998, a tract of land that had been used as an illegal dump. In June 2024, remains were discovered at the Lake Lanier site. Partial skeletal remains. DNA testing was initiated. Results took 8 weeks. On August 12, 2024, the medical examiner confirmed a match. The remains belonged to Terrell Marcus Hayes. Detective Cooper called Vivian at 8 a.m. Told her they'd identified Terrell. Told her they'd finally found him. Told her she could bring him home. Vivian dropped the phone. Jasmine, her great-niece who'd moved in to help care for her, picked it up. Heard Cooper repeating her name. Heard him saying he was sorry. Heard him saying the remains were being released to the family. 26 years of not knowing. 26 years of searching. 26 years of people telling her to move on. And now she knew. Her grandson hadn't run away, hadn't abandoned her, hadn't chosen to disappear. He'd been taken. He'd been murdered. He'd been buried in the woods like he didn't matter. But he did matter. He always mattered. And now everyone knew his name. The funeral was held on September 12, 2024. 27 years to the day after Terrell disappeared. Greater Hope Baptist Church was packed. Standing room only. Terrell's friends from Douglas Academy, now in their 40s. Darnell, Malik, teachers who remembered him. Strangers who'd followed the story, reporters who covered the case, families of the other 5 boys, the mothers who'd become sisters through shared grief. Vivian Hayes sat in the front pew, wore a navy blue dress, Terrell's favorite color, held a photograph of him in her lap. The same photograph she'd carried for 26 years. The same photograph that had been on flyers and posters and news reports. The same photograph that proved he'd existed, that he'd been loved, that he'd mattered. The pastor spoke about justice delayed but not denied, about truth revealed in its own time, about mothers who refuse to let their children be forgotten, about communities that must do better to protect their young. Vivian spoke last. Her voice was steady. She said Terrell was a good boy, a smart boy, a boy who wanted to build bridges, wanted to go to Howard, wanted to make her proud. She said, Leonard Wyatt stole that future, stole her grandson, stole 26 years of her life spent searching. But she said, Wyatt didn't win, because Terrell wasn't forgotten, because his name would be remembered, because other mothers would know they weren't crazy, that their instincts were right, that when they said their children didn't run away, people should believe them. She said Terrell's case changed things. Led to policy reforms in Georgia, requiring all school security footage to be preserved for minimum 10 years. Led to new protocols for investigating missing persons cases involving minors. Led to mandatory cross-referencing of similar cases across jurisdictions. Led to a database tracking predators who work in schools. She said it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And something mattered. Terrell was buried at Southview Cemetery, plot overlooking a small grove of oak trees. The gravestone read, Terrell Marcus Hayes, the 3rd of March 1981, September 1997. Beloved grandson, friend, dreamer, lost but never forgotten. Found by the grandmother, who never stopped searching. Vivian Hayes stands outside Douglas Academy. The school was demolished 4 months ago. New development going up. Luxury condos. Nothing remains of the building where her grandson disappeared. But there's a memorial now. Small granite marker at the corner of the lot. Funded by the 6. Dedicated to all 6 boys. Names carved in stone. Terrell Hayes. Jamal Richards. DeAndre Washington. Kevin Robinson. Brandon Lewis. Isaiah Thompson. The inscription reads, They walked into schools and never walked out. They were taken. They are remembered. They matter. Vivian kneels at the marker. Places 6 blue carnations. 1 for each boy. Terrell's favorite color. She does this every year now. September 12th. The day everything changed. Other people join her. Darnell. Malik. Isaiah from the 4. Teachers. Community members. The other mothers from the 6. Detective Cooper. People who never knew Terrell but know his story. People who understand that forgetting is a second death. That speaking their names keeps them alive. Remains of the other 5 boys were never found. Searches continue. The 6 continue advocating. Continue pressuring authorities. Continue refusing to let their sons be buried in unmarked graves somewhere in the Georgia woods. Vivian is 72 now. Still works part-time at the hospital. Still keeps Terrell's room untouched. Still wears blue every September 12th. Still believes that truth matters, even when justice is incomplete. Leonard Wyatt's death in 1998 meant no trial. No cross-examination. No public reckoning. No moment where victims' families could face him. No testimony explaining why he targeted these specific boys. No confession revealing where the others were buried. Just a dead predator and a cold trail and 6 families left wondering. But they have truth. They have proof. They have each other. And they have the knowledge that their sons didn't run away, didn't abandon their families, didn't choose to disappear. They were taken. They were murdered. And they are remembered. Detective Cooper was promoted to head of the cold case unit. Continues working cases involving missing minors. Uses Terrell's case as a teaching example. Trains new investigators on the importance of preserving evidence. On the importance of believing families. On the importance of seeing patterns others miss. Douglas Academy security footage is now used in law enforcement training programs across Georgia. Shows what happens when evidence is stored and forgotten. Shows how 26 years can pass before anyone looks at what's been sitting in a basement all along. Shows how boys like Terrell Hayes are failed by systems that are supposed to protect them. Vivian returns to her apartment as the sun sets. Lights a candle in the window. Does this every night. Has done it since September 13th, 1997. A light in the darkness. A promise that she's still here. Still remembering. Still loving the boy who wanted to build bridges. On her kitchen counter is a photograph. New one. Shows 6 mothers standing together outside the memorial. Arms linked. Faces tired but resolute. The caption reads, "The 6. Mothers who refuse to forget." Next to it is another photograph. Terrell, at 15, wearing his Douglas Academy basketball jersey. Smiling. His quiet smile. Looking at something beyond the camera. Looking toward a future he'd never reach. But looking forward anyway. Hoping anyway. Dreaming anyway. Those dreams belong to him. They always will. Terrell Marcus Hayes was missing for 26 years. But he's not missing anymore. He's home. And his grandmother made sure the world would never forget his name.